just check out the Amplified Trading YouTube channel. If you just search and subscribe to Amplified Trading on YouTube, you're better. But otherwise, look, let's get back to business and talk of vaccines. This was one of the headlines that we had last night. So Johnson & Johnson said it's delaying its rollout of its COVID-19 vaccine in Europe after US regulators paused immunizations with the shot pending a review of rare blood clots. Now, one thing to be aware of here is that initially US indices dipped when the US came out and said they're pausing the use of J&J's drug. They're going to review it over the coming days. However, we were already recovering off those lows even before the CPI hit. One thing to bear in mind here is that the J&J vaccine, like the one developed by AstraZeneca, uses an adenovirus to deliver the genetic material into the body to provoke a defense against COVID-19. The Astra vaccine uses a chimpanzee adenovirus to achieve the response, while J&J is derived from humans. That's the one slight differential. But Russia's Sputnik 5 vaccine and one from China, CanSino Biologics, they also rely on the same approach. And again, this mainly being the different approach from the mRNA technology adopted by Moderna and Pfizer BioNTech. So the point being there with this, and the reason why I think that there's intraday volatility and how to understand and interpret that, is that when you see a flash headline like J&J pause their drug in the US, the initial knee-jerk reaction is always fairly exaggerated. Because if you think about the way the news is delivered, it's simply just a red, sticky kind of headline on Bloomberg, and markets will react in a knee-jerk, kind of almost emotive fashion to that. But one of the things I always encourage our traders to do is look beyond the headline and understand the kind of devil in the detail. And actually, I think, given the fact that the delivery mechanism, if you like, of how that drug works with J&J, very similar to Astra, and we're talking about the same issue in terms of blood clots as the risk in question, then actually I think the market was better prepared now than it would have been without Astra having confronted its issues that it's had over the recent weeks. And so that being said then, when Sputnik 5 comes out, or the Chinese company CanSino comes out, then again, it's almost like a diminishing law of return in regard to the fact that the blood clot issue is definitely looks like it's linked in a way to that delivery mechanism. So it gets less surprising each time. A couple of things though. We've also got Mike Ivey in our community. Very blessed to have him as part of the team, because he really is on top of all of this stuff. And he made three really key interesting points, I think, about the vaccine, which I wanted to run through. So point one was it shouldn't really affect the US vaccination plan too much. Entirely plausible the FDA could issue a limitation to use along the lines of the EMA, the MHRA, and AstraZeneca. But mRNA vaccines are becoming ever more plentiful in the US. And an interesting graphic here to look at is this one. This is looking at the kind of composition and the timeline of what the US rollout program looks like for COVID-19. And as you can see, from the beginning, they've been very aggressive, adopting the more expensive and the technologically different mRNA vaccines in Pfizer and Moderna. J&J is coming a little bit later to the party, only really started to be manufactured and distributed now, to pick up in the future.
Excuse me.
So one of the things here might be that there may be some operational issues, as J&J vaccine may need to be aimed at older people rather than the hard to reach. There's obviously unique benefits to the fact that the J&J drug generally, as comparative to say Moderna or Pfizer, just generally easier to store, therefore easier to distribute given the temperature issue. It's also a single shot rather than a double shot, so on and so forth. The overall takeaway here then is that it could well delay the overall vaccine strategy, but we're talking about weeks rather than months. So it's a little bit more contained than perhaps then the kind of sensational way it was reported yesterday. To further stress that point, this was an interesting tweet that I saw last night. I think it was around 9 p.m. or so, London time, yesterday evening. and it's the Pfizer CEO. And the Pfizer CEO here is saying it's ramped up production of their COVID-19 vaccine, and actually they can deliver 10% more doses to the US by the end of May. Previously agreed a total of 220 million, and will supply a full 300 million agreed on the end of July, 2 weeks early. So almost counteracting it. And if you think about the weighted importance for the strategy of deployment of vaccines in America, well, it's almost outweighs that percentage increase what J&J were going to bring to market at this point anyway. So it offsets and mitigates then the kind of quantifying the impact of what the J&J issue might have. And at this point, the J&J issue, we're still yet to really see the definitive outcome from the likes of the FDA and so on. The other thing then is what does this look like, and what's the impact for Europe? So okay, we can ascertain here then from this discussion that perhaps then it's not so bad for the US because of the composition of the basket of vaccines that the US has its strategy based upon. But what about Europe? And unfortunately for Europe, as it has been from the beginning with the whole vaccine saga, it's another significant speed bump actually, given the fact that COVID cases are still generally heading in the wrong direction in a lot of areas who are still facing restrictions at the moment, coming in contrast to generally reopenings that are happening at the moment, like in the UK that initiated on Monday. It's definitely more significant potentially for the EU. And the reason for that is that a lack of supply because of production problems and now possible restrictions on the use of compounds is the same issues that we've had with generally the Astra vaccine. If you remember, the ingredients that's required as part of the makeup of then the manufacturing process that might well take place in Europe, a lot of that comes from the UK, for example. Now, by the numbers, I was just looking at this last night, the EU has 200 million J&J doses on order with an option for 200 million more. So this chart we have here of the US, I don't unfortunately have one for Europe, but Europe's heavily dependent on J&J coming to market. So this is a significant headache. They had 55 million doses, which were expected to hit this quarter. The other potentially problematic thing here is that companies like Pfizer and Moderna have very much been steering their efforts to servicing the US, not Europe. And as we've just seen from the Pfizer CEO, they're looking to ramp up production to top up the speed of delivering to America, given the fact that generally how this has worked is the first orders in are the first clients to be served, and America were very aggressive for Pfizer and Moderna. UK was very aggressive to Astra. Europe's been a little bit slow on the pickup on the order side, and so therefore they're kind of last in queue. And so it's just another problem after the AstraZeneca one, now for J&J for Europe going forward in terms of their ability to really continue to speed up the vaccination rollout, which of course will be imperative for the eventual reopening of the economy and a divergence in timing that we might see between the US, UK and mainland Europe. The third point and the final point here is really about vaccine hesitancy. There were some charts, if you remember, I shared briefly a few weeks ago, which showed that after the kind of vaccine war saga that we're still kind of seeing to a certain degree, but when it was at its most venomous between the European officials and Britain, what we actually saw was that UK people have remained pretty confident with the acceptance of the Astra drug, but the confidence in the validity of that drug has decreased substantially in mainland Europe, i.e. they don't trust it, they don't want it. Which is another real problematic potential issue, because if, let's say, the J&J drug is said to have had blood clot issues, and this gets significantly blown out of proportion by the media, then that can have negative connotation then for people's perception about the safetiness of that drug. And so if then J&J does come to market, and it is able to then be seen by the medical authorities as being accepted, that the benefits outweigh the risks, like what we've heard with the Astra drug from the EMA in terms of for the UK and Europe, well then the problem is then, do people believe that? In mainland Europe for Astra drug, we've seen they don't, irrespective of the medical advice. So this is another third final issue that could potentially arise from the vaccine situation. So yeah, a couple things there. I know quite a lot to take in. The final comment was the White House. What have they said about this? Well, their COVID coordinator has said the US has more than enough Pfizer and Moderna vaccines to maintain its current pace of vaccinations. And I think there's some legitimacy in that, just given the kind of what we've just discussed with the composition of the vaccine basket in the US. That is it. So I'm going to leave it there, let you guys get on with the session. Hopefully the discussion on the vaccines was useful, and I wish you a good session ahead. Thanks very much.